What up, YouTube? It's your boy, ATrueHero. Or as you might be thinking, your boy, a true villain. Now you're just somebody that I used to know. Don't worry, your boy still has love for Diva Hero. But Nationals is coming up in less than a week, and I had to test the best deck of the format, Blackwings. Now, my Blackwing deck is a little bit different than the traditional Blackwing deck. For one, as you might notice, I'm on triple Vayu. Vayu is oftentimes not respected, so opponents don't want to play their power cards against it, such as Mirror Force or Torrential. Also, Vayu is really good at eating cards like D-Prison. That way your other monsters whose attacks are more important, like Shora, can go through more often. Not to mention, just as you play 3 Vayus, you also play triple Icarus Attack. And Vayu is the best card to activate Icarus Attack with. The only time you really want to Icarus a real Blackwing, such as Shora, Bora, etc., is when you go attack and they go D-Prison and then you go Chain Icarus. Basically in the events where you get a +1. But outside of those rare circumstances, Vayu is the best target for Icarus. So triple Icarus, triple Vayu, no doubt. Also, I'm playing Gores. And actually, Gores and Vayu loosely combo together because Gores is level 7 and the Gores token is also level 7. So by playing triple Vayu, if you can search it off of a Shora, it increases your odds of being able to make a level 8. Not to mention, Gores is broken. Now, Gores is not played in many Blackwing decks because many other Blackwing decks play a heavy trap lineup. But in my Blackwing deck, I'm only playing 9 traps. I'm not main decking Bottomless. And the reason being is because even though Bottomless is a broken card, Icarus Attack covers it all. You got a problem, just Icarus it away. I generally save Bottomlesses for the troublesome matchups, such as against Hero Beat or Gladiator Beast, or even against the Mirror Match. But any other time, Icarus Attack can just hold it down by itself. Also, Gores is just a great card. No matter what deck I'm playing, if it can support Gores, you can best believe Gores is going to be in there. Now, the last thing I'll say about Gores is many people also think that it's conflicting because you play, in addition to the heavy trap lineup, cards like Double Whirlwind. But the thing is, when you're up against competent players, Whirlwind is not going to stick around for a long time. Because this card is so game breaking, either one, when I have Whirlwind up, I'm already winning so I don't need Gores, or two, my opponent will quickly take out Whirlwind, thereby giving Gores an opportunity to drop. Moving away from the monsters, we have triple Book of Moon. I'm a firm believer in Book of Moon and Blackwings. I think the card is busted because one, it pairs nicely with Shora. Two, it's a defensive and offensive card. And three, you can do some tricks with it when you bring out a synchro from Vayu's effect. Let's say you have a Vayu, not Vayu, but let's say you have an Armwing or even an Armor Master that you brought out from Vayu's effect. Your opponent goes attack into your Armor Master. You go Chain Book. Now the Armor Master forgets that it was brought out through Vayu's effect and it becomes real. And this can also be used on Armwing as well, because if you need to go for a piercing game lethal shot, you can book your Armwing, flip it up, and then attack whatever monster to get that nice piercing damage in. So Book of Moon is such a versatile card. I believe playing 3 hands down in Blackwings. The last kind of differential tech that I play in my Blackwing deck is Deck Devi. This is my signature card. I'm going to be playing this in every single deck that I can because Deck Devi is just that card. And there are many people who are saying things like it's inconsistent, it's not that good. Fine, let them say that. I'm going to play it, all right? Because as long as you have knowledge of your opponent's hand, you can play around every single card that they have and ultimately win the game. And there was even a top 8 match that I had where I won hands down because of Deck Devi. And that wasn't the only game. If I successfully resolve cards such as Deck Devastation Virus or Trap Dust Shoot, I personally have a 95% win rate because I know what cards you have. But anyway, that's enough about the deck list. I would say the rest is pretty much standard. Double Fissure on the side for Consecrated Light, of course. And there's nothing else special. It's just standard Blackwings, you know? Standard Blackwings by a not-so-standard duelist. So anyway, guys, I hope you can enjoy today's recap. A little bit different than the standard D heroes. Not D heroes, but you know what I mean. D heroes, E heroes, Diva heroes, right? Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Your boy TrueHero truly appreciates the love. And with that, let's get started into the top 8 analysis. Okay, so round 1, I'm up against TroopDupeScoop. And I'm going to tell you now, I lost 5 RPSs in a row straight. So my opponent's on zombies. He goes summon turtle, set a back row, and pass. I look at my opening hand and I'm like, this game is over before it even began. I have Whirlwind, Sirocco, Dark Arm. Like, what else more can you ask? So anyway, in order to get around his Pyramid Turtle and back row easily, I set Vayu, set Icarus attack, because I want to ensure that my Whirlwind Sirocco play goes off. And if he sets any back rows that are relevant, Icarus attack can take them out. So I set Vayu, set Icarus, and I also set Oppression as well because he's on zombies. And the good thing about Whirlwind Sirocco is that I don't need to special summon. I can search out Ashura if I need to, and if I didn't activate Oppression, I could search out another card such as Gale, Bora, or whatever I need at the time. So my opponent, he decides to go to his end phase and he sets a back row. So this works out perfectly for me because now I can get rid of the unknown cards. Because truly I'm not worried about the Pyramid Turtle, because when I go Icarus here, I can target both back rows. That puts 1 dark in the graveyard. I can go Whirlwind into Sirocco, search out Gale. That's 3 darks in the graveyard. Now I could drop a Dark Arm. So I have a level 8, I have Dark Arm, and an Arm Wing ready to go at any time. So when he ends his turn, I go end phase, activate Icarus, and then some problems come up. He changed Dust Tornado, which is fine, takes out my Oppression, but then picks up his Torrential. Now, I'm not sure if it was an accident or if he did it intentionally. I like to give everybody that I face the benefit of the doubt, because when we talked about it briefly afterwards, he seemed like a genuine guy. So I don't think that he did do it intentionally. I do think it was an accident. However, we didn't even get to finish the set because, as you can see, he had connection issues. And the connection was so bad that he actually just decided to concede. But even though he did concede, and it's unfortunate that I didn't get to play a full set against TroopDupeScoop, as all the viewers at home can see, I had at least 79 points of damage already, right, from the play that I described earlier, right? End phase, Icarus, take out both his back rows, Whirlwind, Sirocco, Synchro, make a level 8, drop Dark Arm, make Arm Wing, that's 79, right? I don't run a level 8 Synchro that would have put me over 8,000, but Stardust, Dark Arm, Arm Wing with Book of Moon set, there's no way that he can come back. And now looking at the replay, right, this Pyramid Turtle would have been gone. He would have, Torrential was gone because that was the card that we saw from the replay. Return is dead. Book of Life doesn't do anything. Diva doesn't do anything because I have Book of Moon, right? So this game 1 was over. But hopefully in the future, me and TroopDupeScoop can have a proper set, but that was the end of round 1. So on to the next. Round 2. Okay, so round 2. And as I already mentioned, I lost 5 RPSs in a row. So don't expect the TrueHero to go first anytime soon. I'm up against Dan Top Deck Team, and I actually played him in tournament before. Now, at this point, of course, it's too early in the tournament to know what anyone is playing. So Dan Top Deck probably assumes that I'm on Diva Hero, and I'm completely blind as to what he's playing. My opening hand is actually quite good. And this is why I was saying, guys, Vayu is so good. This is why I play triple Vayu. Game 1, as you saw, I opened up, or rather set 1, I opened up Vayu and Icarus. Set 2, once again, Vayu and Icarus. It's such a good combination. Now, I'm not saying that every Blackwing player should be playing triple Vayu. I get it because it sucks if you draw it at a bad time. But you should at least be on double Vayu. And some people might wonder, well, TrueHero, why don't you play Dark Grepher if you're playing triple Vayu? Because Grepher sucks. Alright? Grepher is only good in Vayu Turbo, and of course Diva Hero as well, right? If you're not playing Grepher and Diva Hero, you don't want to win. But the reason why I personally think Dark Grepher is not good in traditional Blackwings is because, one, he's not good against the mirror match. He's not a Blackwing monster, so you can't collude with him. In 17, he gets eaten alive by Shura. Like, you don't want to draw him unless you have another card in your hand. And he's just always, you know, pretty much like a minus. You know what I mean? I guess you could pitch Vayu Sirocco and then like it doesn't become a minus, it becomes a 1-for-1, but it's just not worth it. I'd rather those cards just get to the graveyard naturally than to try to just force it in there, right? Guys, if you know what I mean, you don't want to force it in there. You want to take it slow. Anyway, so my opponent goes set a monster pass along with a back row. On my turn, I mirror his play, right? So his turn, he draws, he flips up Raikou, and I'm okay with that, right? So I chain Icarus, and I get rid of his cards. He does mill a Plague, which is quite annoying, right? So I assume at this point that he's on Vayu Turbo. Now, he summons Vayu, and that confirms my suspicions that he is on Vayu Turbo. He sets a back row, and he passes. So I need my play to go through, right? So I go Heavy Storm, summon Shura because it's a Vayu, and plus I have Collude in my hand, and I get Gale. Now, the reason why I choose to get Gale here is because now that I know he's on Vayu Turbo actually has a very difficult time dealing with Armor Master. So I make Armor Master, and I pass. My opponent thinks for a bit, and he decides to summon Sirocco and go for the Black Rose play, which I'm completely okay with because worst comes to worst, I have Goris. So my opponent summons Armwing, attacks, and I unexpectedly, in his case, right, drop Goris. He sets 2 back rows and pass. Now at this point, I have a choice. I can either become hyper offensive or I can play conservatively. Becoming hyper offensive in this case would be summoning Shura, attacking, and colluding. But I don't see the reason to do that. So I take it slow, and actually it's a good thing that I did because we can see he had both Bottomless and Torrential, right? And I do have a Vayu Engrave, so if I were to get too aggressive, I would have a backup monster to summon, right? Silverwind is 28, he's quite difficult to out, especially because my opponent already used his Plague. But anyway, I play conservatively, and I just run over his Armwing. He draws into a Vayu, and I just keep attacking with Goris. He draws into a Raikou, well, Charge, right? But Charge, Raikou, same thing. He sets it, obviously, because he doesn't have any other cards in his hand, and he passes. Now, at this point, I consider summoning a monster, but I stick to my game plan, and I run over his Raikou with my token, and it destroys my Goris. So I'm so far up in card advantage that I'm not too worried about making a silly play, right? Just committing too many cards to the field just to get wiped out by a potential Torrential. My opponent decides to summon Armor Master. He runs over my token, which I'm completely okay with, and I draw into my first trap in a while, Solemn. And now with Solemn, now I have less of a worry if I decide to become offensive. So I summon Shura, which is really good in this situation, but he flips up the Bottomless. I decide to summon Silverwind, and he flips up Torrential, which I'm completely okay with because with his Torrential, he took out a Vayu. So I decide to set a back row and pass. Now, because I'm up against the mirror match, I decide to save the Sirocco for as long as possible. Sirocco is so good against, one, the mirror match, and I know this isn't technically a mirror match, but it's another Vayu Sirocco deck. It's so good against, one, the mirror match, and two, against Vayu Turbo. So you only want to summon your Sirocco when you absolutely need to. Another thing, if you summon your Sirocco too early, your opponent can summon their Sirocco, and especially against Vayu Turbo, they run cards like Burial. So my opponent would be able to Burial, bring all these guys back, make a bunch of level 6 and level 7 synchros, pump up a guy, and I lose, even through Collude, right? 47 is not that much against a Sirocco deck. So anyway, on the end phase, he MSTs, which I'm okay with because now he doesn't have anything except for one card in his hand. And like I said, against this deck, you need to play conservatively. Keep your Siroccos. So I summon Bora, and I just play as conservatively as possible. I did consider summoning Collude and then double summoning Bora off Bora. But once again, the problem is if he has Sirocco, he goes Sirocco, pump, and that's game. And we can see in the replay that he did, in fact, have Sirocco. So I summoned Bora, hit him for 17. On his turn, he draws an Army Knight. He summons his Sirocco and he pumps, which I'm completely okay with. He doesn't have any back rows, and at that point, I let it all out. I just explode on him, right? And this is why you need to play the Sirocco versus Sirocco game as smart as possible. Whoever summons the first Sirocco is in an advantage in that they have the strongest monster on the board, but it's only beneficial if you have back rows to keep it alive. If not, the person who summons the second Sirocco is ultimately the winner because they'll get a larger boost. So I summon my Sirocco, I have special Bora, I pump, I attack, I have double Collude, so it's just Omega game. Now, game 2, I opened up Whirlwind Sirocco, which is really good, along with the MST. So I space, get rid of his back row, Whirlwind Sirocco, and I make Gale, because I have a read that he has either Raikou or Hamster. And I've said this before, in Edison format, you should generally assume that your opponent's face down monster is a Raikou. So I make Stardust to combat the Raikou. It was indeed Raikou. I set down 2 back rows, and when I see this, I just don't see a way that I can lose, because I have Stardust behind a Solemn and a Bottomless. So as long as I pull a Blackwing monster, I'll gain infinite pluses off Whirlwind, plus I already have a Sirocco in a grave with Vayyu in my hand. So it's quite difficult for me to lose in this situation. Now, on my opponent's turn, he thinks about what to do. He summons Card Trooper and hope for good mills, and he sets 3 back rows. Now, I summoned Vayyu out of my hand because I drew another one, and as you guys can see, because I play triple Vayyu, I'm bound to draw them. But it's not bad. It's really not that bad when you draw your Vayyus. So I attack, and the attack goes through, but I don't attack with Stardust, because there's no reason to. Risking 2,500 points of damage is not worth the Stardust getting deprisoned, and I'd rather save my Solemn Judgment for a more crucial card such as Compulsory. So I attack for 800, and I just bide my time until I draw a Blackwing for Black Whirlwind. But unfortunately, I don't draw one. I just continue to draw additional back rows, and I just have a Vayyu, so it's not really helping my Whirlwind here. Now, my opponent goes summon Greffer. He goes pitch pitch. I don't activate Bottomless here because Greffer is not the threat. The threat are the Blackwing monsters, and especially a Sirocco, right? So if I don't see a Blackwing Synchro monster or a Sirocco coming on the field, I'm not going to Bottomless, especially with the field presence that I have. So my opponent summons his Greffer, he does his Greffer shenanigans, he pitches a card, he gets the Vayyu Sirocco combo. So he appears to be in a good position, but my back rows are just too real. He does run over my Vayyu. I draw into a Book of Moon, which is great, and my opponent flips up his face down Rhoda, which just shows me that he is very weak, right? With Greffer's effect, he's able to pitch the Necro and a Vayyu and ends his turn. Now, he set an additional back row, which kind of just made me even more worried that he's not afraid of his opponent dropping a card like Heavy Storm. And rightfully so, because it's 4/4, but the only difference is if I Heavy at this point and my Heavy goes through, all you have is a Dark Greffer and 1 Vayyu play, which can't even beat over Stardust. I mean, you have double Vayyu, but you're going to need your other Synchro to die before you can make an Armor Master. And at that point, if you've used all those resources, you've already lost the game. So I summon my Sirocco, not Sirocco rather, my Armwing, and I attacked. And it does unfortunately get Necroed. Now my opponent is forced to switch his Greffer in defense mode because he doesn't have anything to pitch with it. So he switches Vayyu and he specials Armwing, and now we're looking at the Armwing Showdown. Now my opponent does indeed decide to draw and pass, and on my turn I decide to get on the offensive and I attack. I attack his Greffer, but my Greffer is met with a deprison. Now this would have been the perfect time to activate Icarus Attack, because then my opponent would lose so many cards, and not to mention I don't have to worry about Starlight Road because I have Stardust, and I don't have to worry about Solemn because I have my own Solemn set. So I'm in such a comfortable position now that I don't even see it worth it to activate Solemn on the deprison. So I just let my guy get booked in hopes that if he can't kill it, it becomes a real Armwing, and my opponent draws for turn, he draws Vayu, which seems like a bad draw, but it's really good in pairing with Dark Grepher. So my opponent does the Vayu Sirocco combo and summons a fake Arm Wing of his own. Now, he does indeed attack, and there's nothing I can do to stop the attack. Like, yes, I have Book of Moon, but I don't want to turn his monster real if I don't have to. So my hand is pretty dead right now. I have 3 cards that don't do much in this current game state. So despite everything, Dan Top Deck Team is favored to win this particular game. So I set Vayu. My opponent doesn't want to run into Mirror Force, so he makes a smart decision by not attacking at all. I draw into a Blackwing monster finally, and I'm able to run over his Grepher, right? 17 versus 16. Grepher dies, and afterwards, my opponent's Arm Wing attacks my Bora. He sets a back row and he passes. So at this point, I'm thinking in my head, I've already won. I have Stardust, I have a real back row, I have Blizzard, and I'm about to make a Bree, a Brionic. Like, I don't see a way that Dan Top Deck Team can win this duel. So I summon Blizzard, I activate the effect, bring back Bora, make a Brionic, right? Just as planned. I pitch a Vayu, and with that, my opponent just decides to concede. Now, he did have some real back rows, right? Actually, all 4 of these back rows are real, but the problem is Brionic just takes care of the problem, right? All I really have to do is bounce the Synchro and then just start attacking. And worst comes to worst, my opponent flips up Solemn, and I Solemn and Solemn back. But anyway, Dan Top Deck Team, definitely a great duelist. I really enjoy all the sets that we play. I'm looking forward to the next. And with that said, on to round 3.
Okay, so round 3. I'm up against purrelyana. And actually, I want to take a moment to apologize because I played her in a previous set at Deck Devastators 4, and I mistakenly misgendered her. So in the future, if I ever misgender anyone on my replay analysis, please send me a PM, reach out to me on Discord, and I'll make sure to correct that in future videos. So anyway, she does win the RPS, but she only sets a back row and passes. On my turn, I open up Rowan Shora, which is kind of like one of Blackwing's best opening plays, and I add Collude. Now, if you're ever in a situation where you're not sure what to add with Rowan, the go-to option is Collude if you summon a Shora. If you already have a Collude, the next best option would be Blizzard. Reason being, Blizzard will allow you access to level sync synchros, and if you still have Rowan up, you can even search out a Vayu. So you can go plays like pitch the Vayu that you just got for Brionic, or even make an Arm Wing, and if you have the Vayu in your hand, Arm Wing and Brionic loosely combo to make Armor Master through Vayu's effect. Now, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a game where there's not one answer all the time, so this is just a generalization. But anyway, I open up Whirlwind Shora, add to Collude, and I go in for damage. Now at this point in time, I assume that she's actually on fairies, because when we played at Deck Devastators, she was playing fairies at that event too. So I go Whirlwind Shora, set a back row, and pass, and she summons Sirocco, much to my surprise. Now at this point in time, I don't actually have an out to the Sirocco, so she pumps up, attacks, and I'm forced to take 2,000. Now, it's not the end of the world here because I have Rowan up. But on my turn, immediately she flips up MST, which was a really smart play by her. Because 1, in case I have Icarus, it prevents her from losing her cards. And 2, in case I have Solemn Judgment, when I go summon my monster, if she has Icarus, then it prevents me from activating my Whirlwind and her losing a monster for nothing. So this was a very intelligent MST. So she spaces, gets rid of my oppression, which was dead in this matchup, and I don't summon Sirocco. The reason why I don't summon Sirocco is because in the mirror match and also against Vayu Turbo, Sirocco is such a powerful card because he pumps up and gains the attack of all Blackwing monsters on the field, including your side of the field and your opponent's side of the field. So you want to save Sirocco when absolutely necessary. So I summon the Collude to bait out a potential Icarus, and the bait goes through. So I'm not too worried because I have Gores in my hand, so I just pass. Generally, Blackwing decks don't play Gores, so if she were to attack into this Gores, she wouldn't expect it. On her turn, she just sets a few back rows and pass, and on my turn, I'm also forced to just draw and pass anyway. So the game goes into a draw pass game state until eventually she pulls into Shura. Now she attacks direct with 18, and I'm forced to drop Gores here. Reason why, 42 can easily deplete when you're up against Blackwings. Not to mention, as Gores, when he summons a Gores token upon his summon, this will also potentially bait out an Icarus if she has another one. So on my turn, I draw and I go offensive, and she doesn't have Icarus attack. So I attack, and I figure at this point, well, if she doesn't have Icarus attack, I never actually said that I was going to go into damage, into the damage step. So I activate Book of Moon, and the reason why I attack with the token was to guard against Quilute. Let's say that purrelyana did indeed have the Quilute when I went the token crash, then I'll take damage, of course. However, the token would be destroyed and not sent to the graveyard, which means Shura would not be able to activate the effect. So anyway, like I said, when I see she doesn't have anything, and as I never said I was going to damage in the first place, I activate Book of Moon, which puts her Shura face down, and now both of my attacks go through. So at this point, I set 2 back rows because I'm not worried about her having Icarus because she would have played it at that point in time. And now I also don't have to worry about Heavy Storm because if she heavies, it'll be at best a 2 for 2, assuming she has a pro set heavy. But more likely than not, she would play it out of her hand and she would actually go -1. And I'm okay with this trade because in my hand, I also have 2 real back rows. So on her turn, she goes End Phase Dust, hits the Book of Moon. She summons Sirocco, sets a back row. I go for a Blizzard play, and I don't make any synchros. So I attack, and she flips up D Prison. Now, the reason why I didn't want to make any synchros was because that would just be easy Icarus bait. So I still had to just make sure that she didn't have an Icarus or even a Mirror Force, right? Because if she has Mirror Force, then I can at least keep the Shura alive. So I set 2 back rows and I pass. She pumps up and activates Brain Control. So here I know she's going for the Black Rose play. So I Icarus, I get rid of my Blizzard, and this is another reason why not making a level 6 synchro was good. I take out her 2 cards, and she does have Compulse, and she chains it on my Shura. Now, quite an interesting card to chain it on because it may have been better to chain it on her own monster. And that way she can have Sirocco in her hand. And as I said before, Sirocco is such a deadly card to have in the mirror match. But anyway, now her cards are destroyed because of my Icarus. She allures her Bora away. Now, mind you, at the start of her turn, she activated Sirocco's effect, which means she cannot attack with any other monster other than the monster whose effect it was activated on, which was Sirocco himself, and that monster is no longer on the field. So basically, she can't attack this turn. So she continues her turn, and she specials out Gale, but I book it down because I don't want her to make a Armor Master. Because with my current setup, I actually don't have an easy way to get rid of Armor Master. I do have Icarus attack, but I would rather save this card for an absolute emergency. If I have to choose between saving Book and saving Icarus attack, Icarus is a much better card to keep because Icarus can take out any annoying back rows. So I book down her Gale, and this is a good play as long as she doesn't have another Bora. And on her turn, she synchros into a Goyu Guardian, but I'm not worried because she can't attack. She sets a D Prison. On my turn, I draw, I summon Shura, and the reason why I don't summon Bora is because I know the card that I booked will be eaten by Shura. So I attack with Shura, I guard against Mirror Force, she has D Prison, which was absolutely perfect, and this is why I saved my Icarus attack. Icarus attack, take out both her cards, and that's pretty much the game right there, right? She draws Sirocco off the top, which is good for her, but in my hand, I already have lethal, right? She doesn't have any more cards. She doesn't have anything to stop an attack, so just summon Sirocco, special summon Bora, pump, and attack in this game. So I just reveal the 2 cards on her end phase, and she concedes. Now, game 2. My opening is also quite good, right? Because I have, once again, Sirocco. Now, I don't have much of a follow-up after Sirocco, so I think about what the best course of option is, and I decide to summon Blizzard. The reason why I go summon Blizzard and attack is because Blackwings are such an aggressive deck. Generally, the only card that they would set is a Vayu. So at least with this, I can go run over the Vayu and set my own Icarus. And a lot of Blackwing players, they try to hold on to their Blizzards until it can be used as a combo card, right? So that they can get the free +1, like summon Blizzard, get a Bora or Shora out the graveyard. And while this is an amazing play, you have to play the hand that you're dealt. And sometimes Blackwings struggles with pulling monsters. If I keep waiting, this gives my opponent opportunities, chances to draw more cards. So I want to be as aggressive as possible. Blackwings is an aggressive deck, so you need to play in an aggressive manner. So anyway, I run over her Vayu. I had to read that it was, and it was correct. And I set Icarus of my own. Now this puts me at the better tempo because even if she does have Icarus, I don't mind losing a Blizzard, and I don't mind losing an Icarus attack. So on her turn, she summons Sirocco, she pumps, and I don't want to take all this damage, so I get a good trade by killing her Sirocco along with her Book of Moon. Now, she sets a back row and she passes, so at this point, even though she started, so that means she initially is supposed to be at a +1, as you can see, now I'm the one who's up in card advantage, right? It's 5-4. I summon Bora and I attack. I'm not worried about anything because I have double Book of Moon. The attack goes through, I set Book, because ultimately my logic is, assuming the back row she has is Icarus, I'm okay trading her Icarus for a Bora and a Book of Moon. That's a great trade, especially considering I have Sirocco, which is amazing in the mirror match, as I mentioned before, and Gores in my hand in case things get out of hand. So she summons her Arm Wing off of Vayu's effect, attacks, and Book. Such a great card in the mirror match. It stops attacks, it plays around Icarus, and also it makes her synchros, or not just her synchros, but synchros in general, it makes them live, the ones that come off of Vayu's effect. So now actually her Arm Wing is a real Arm Wing, right? If it has a chance to flip up and become aggressive. She sets a back row and pass. To play around Icarus, I just attack. She mirror forces, but I'm not too worried because I have Bottomless. And even if I didn't have Bottomless, like I mentioned before, I have the Gores. I set Bottomless, I pass, she flips it up, I Bottomless, and she Solemns. And from this moment here, as soon as she activated Solemn Judgment, I knew that the set would be over. Generally, in a Blackwing matchup, I side out Solemn Judgment because Solemn Judgment brings your life points down in half, and it's very easy for Blackwings to put on a lot of damage out of nowhere. So even though Solemn is great in that it's an Omni Negate, one of the few Omni Negates in Edison format, it's not worth it against really aggro decks such as Vayu Turbo or Blackwings. So she brings her life points down to 3150, which is great. She attacks into my Gores, which is also great for me. She does indeed have the Gale and she's able to half. And I think to myself, well, if she doesn't have any back rows, then more than likely she's going to lose this game here. So she doesn't have any back rows. I sacrifice the Gores because the Gores is already halved. I go Sirocco, I pump. There's really no reason to switch the token because the token can't attack. And I run over Gale. So this actually here is game unless she has Quilute. So she does indeed have the Quilute, which brings her down to 250. So I set Book of Moon and I pass. She attacks, I Book. She summons her Blizzard, and with Blizzard she makes Magical Android. On my turn, I draw into the card that I side for this matchup, which is Fissure, because Fissure is just an easy 1-for-1 destruction. Since I'm going second, I sided out Dust Shoot and replaced it with Fissure. So I'm not worried about Mirror Force or Torrential because I have Vayu Sirocco. So I get as aggressive, but first I play Fissure. That way I can beat around her Android. So I play Fissure and I summon Vayu, and that's GG. So definitely good games to purrelyana, and I'm looking forward to our next set. And with that out the way, on to the next, round 4.
Okay, so round 4. I'm up against Avid UWU20. Anyway, so as I mentioned before, I lose 5 RPSs in a row. So my opponent goes first. Now, on my turn, I think about whether or not it's worth it to allure. And ultimately, I decide to do it. Reason being is because I can draw into a better whirlwind target. I draw into Vayu, and I decide to banish the Vayu. And I go Whirlwind, Quilute, and I search out Blizzard. So now, even though this isn't the strongest opening, it's also far from the weakest opening. So I go into battle phase because I consider attacking his face down monster. But then I think to myself, well, I don't know what he's on, and if this face down monster is a Raikou, I'm going to lose all of my advantage from Black Whirlwind. So I decide to not attack his face down monster. And instead, I set Solemn, I set Icarus, and I pass. On his standby phase, I activate Icarus attack so he doesn't have an opportunity to flip Raikou. But much to my surprise, his monster was a Peacekeeper. So this was the first of a downhill moment. So he's able to get a plus, he searches out Gear Frame, he heavy storms, and I can't even activate Solemn. Because any deck that plays Machina monsters can easily put on 4,000 damage. My Solemn brings me down to half, he summons Gear Frame, he adds Fortress. If he has any machine monster in his hand, he can summon Machina Fortress, 1825, and that's GG. And looking at the replay, we can see that it would have been game. So I just decide to let the heavy go through. Now he does search out the Fortress, he swings for 18, and sets a back run pass. On my go, I draw, I summon Blizzard, and I actually have two different options, right? Because with Blizzard, I bring back the Kalut. And at this point, I can special summon Gale, half his Gear Frame, make a level 5, and then make a level 8, such as Stardust or Thought Ruler. However, that uses a large amount of resources. Not to mention, the problem with Stardust is his attack baseline. He's 25. So if at any point my opponent summons Machina Fortress against my Stardust, then I'll lose 2 cards. Stardust himself and the card that Machina Fortress pops. So I decide to make Cataster, which is a good play because Machina decks generally have a very tough time outing Cataster. So I make Cataster and I attack, and the attack goes through. I set Book and I pass, and on my opponent's turn, he goes for a Gear Town play. But I'm not worried because I have Cataster. That is until he summons Exile Force, an amazing tech card because this outs Cataster easily. So he tributes, destroys my Cataster, and he attacks for 3,000. So that drops me down to 32. Now on my turn, I draw Nashora, which is perfect because Shora and Gale is an amazing combination. What I had planned to happen was summon Shora, special summon Gale. Gale half, Shora run over. Shora effect, switch out Vayu. Synchro with Shora and Gale into Armor Master. Synchro, Armor Master, and Vayu, because Vayu's effects negate it, into Stardust. And now I have Stardust behind double Book of Moon with an Armor Master and Vayu in the grave, so access to Silverwind. However, things did not go according to plan. After summoning Shora and special summoning Gale, when I halved his monster and I went into the battle phase, my opponent flips up Regeki Break. So really good on him to hold the Regeki Break. And this puts me in a bad spot because even though his monster, Gilgatron Dragon, is halved, it's still big enough to beat over my Gale. And I don't want to Book of Moon his dragon because his stats will get reset. So I set my second book, he runs over my Gale, but I draw Sirocco off the top. Absolutely amazing. Sirocco's able to run over his dragon, he draws in a DD Warrior Lady, but then off the top again, I draw another amazing card, Bora. So I special Bora, I pump up Bora, and I attack, and it was DD Warrior Lady. So things are working out for me quite well. But then on my opponent's turn, he pulls into Gear Frame. But he actually decides not to summon it. And he summons his Machina Fortress by pitching his Gilgatron Dragon. Now here, I can either let the attack ride out or book. So obviously the answer is book. So I send him face down and I pull in the Vayu, which isn't too helpful here. But I need to be as aggressive as possible. So I summon Vayu, I beat over his fortress, he takes out my back row, and I attack direct for 800. Now on his go, he finally summons the Gear Frame that he drew the turn prior, and he adds a force, which allows him to summon Fortress again and beat over both of my monsters. So now I'm in a bit of a bad situation, right? I have 0 cards in hand and 0 cards on the field. I do have a Vayu and Sirocco in the grave, but it won't be good enough if I cannot capitalize off of it, because the Fortress will just run over the Armwing. I draw for turn, Shora, not very helpful in this situation. I run over his gear frame, and I'm forced to just pass. My opponent pulls into Rhoda, which was perfect because he plays a second copy of Exile Force. So, easy play. Summon Exile Force, Tribute to negate, and not negate, but Tribute to destroy my arm ring, and attack directly. Now, game 2, I get to go first, and I lure away the Kolute. Now, this hand is quite good. However, this is a very reactive hand. I cannot make any aggressive plays because Gores, I need to be attacked. Cyber Dragon and Sirocco, my opponent needs to have a monster. So even though this hand is very good, it doesn't generate any offensive presence on the first turn. So I pass after setting a back row. My opponent just sets a back row and passes as well. I summon Shura, I attack. I do have the MST, but I want to save it for a more crucial moment. And he deprisons my Shura, which is a bit unfortunate. So Shura gets banished, I pass, he sets a back row, he passes, and I draw into Blizzard. Now I'm wishing that I deprison, or rather I MST that deprison. Now the thing about Blackwings is, a lot of Blackwing players, they just want to wait. They want to wait until they get their pluses, but with Blackwings, you have to know when to wait and when to be aggressive. Here, if I held on to the Blizzard, then things down the line could have went bad, but I decided to be aggressive by summoning Blizzard and attacking. Not to mention, this isn't a bad play because not only does it put Avid on a clock, but if he beats over my Blizzard, I can summon my Sirocco. So I summon Blizzy, I attack direct for 13, and I pass. He Dust Tornadoes, clears my pulling the rug, and he proceeds to summon DD Warrior Lady off of Rhoda. Now here, he actually doesn't banish, he just beats over, which I'm fine with. So I draw into Kolute. So I go for a bit of a pro play, which is setting Sirocco and setting Mirror Force, because it looks like I don't have anything. So on his turn, he attacks, I Mirror Force. Main phase 2, he sets a back row and he ends. I space it, like I said, saving space for when I needed space, and I flip up Sirocco. So now I'm able to get in good damage. Before entering the battle phase, I calculated whether or not I had game. However, the most I can do here is 28 from Goyu and 2000 from Sirocco, so 48, as I don't have a power card like Dark Arm, or I can't make any Vayu Synchro plays. So I hit him for 2000, bringing him down to 47, and he summons a very interesting card, Zambara the Dark. So this guy is just a beater who gets weaker. However, as strong as he is, he's not stronger than a Sirocco under a Kolute's influence. So he takes good damage here, and he sets it back around passes. I draw into Whirlwind, which is okay, but I don't want to play into Torrential, right? Because once again, I don't have a Vayu. So I attack direct for 2000. He takes it, drops him down to 14. He draws into Compulse. So he sets a back row and he passes. I attack for lethal, and he flips up Compulse. The moment he compulses my Sirocco, I know that I am going to win this game. So I pass because I have Gores. He sets 2 back rows, and I draw, and I contemplate what to do. And seeing as that he's at 1400, I decide to go for game. So I summon Gale, I attack, not game, but bringing him to 100. I attack, brings him down to 100. So now I'm not scared of brain control anymore, and I set a back row and I pass. The reason why I set Torrential despite having Gores is because now my win condition is no longer Gores. He's at 100. So even if I just sneeze on him, it'll be the game. My win condition is going for an aggressive playstyle. So on his turn, he draws into the Warrior Lady, and I draw into Shura. So as I just said, since the win condition is no longer Gores, it's now time to be aggressive. So I go Rowan Shura, and he responds with a Compulse. So this tells me once again that right now he is very weak. So the Sirocco returns to my hand. I set a back row and I pass because I don't want to attack into a potential DD Warrior Lady, which it was. He Heavy Storms, which is a good heavy, but it's just a 2 for 2, right? Because he loses heavy in his back row, and I lose 2 of my back rows. But when I saw that his back row was brain control, he essentially didn't lose anything because this card will be dead for him for the rest of the game. Now, He continues by setting a monster and passing. I sack my Gale for Sirocco, which puts the third Dark in my grave, and I special summon Dark Arm, and from here, that's the end of game 2. Now, moving on to game 3, I do open up pretty average, right? Nothing too special, not a whirlwind, just standard Blackwing hand. Now, my opponent sets a monster and pass. I summon Vayu and I attack. The reason being is because 1, if it's Raikou, I don't mind if Raikou destroys my Vayu, and 2, if it's a card like DD Warrior Lady, it gets that card off the field. But interestingly enough, though it was DD Warrior Lady, my opponent didn't respond by banishing. And this is why I play triple Vayu, because Vayu works so well with Icarus attack. So I set Icarus and Bottomless and I pass. He goes into battle phase, attacks, I Icarus, destroy his 2 cards, and he summons Gear Frame. Although I have Bottomless, I choose not to activate it, because Bottomless is best used against the Machina power cards, such as Machina Fortress or Garujaton Dragon. So I let the summon go through. He searches out a Peacekeeper, he sets 2 back rows and he ends. I draw into Torrential, I set it. I do not summon Sirocco, because let's take a look at his graveyard. He hasn't used Bottomless Trap Hole yet. So if I summon Sirocco and he goes Bottomless, well, the Vayu in my grave becomes useless. So my plan was to wait 1 turn. That way, in case he has a summon stopper such as Bottomless, I can chain Torrential, thereby putting a Vayu and Sirocco in my graveyard so I can continue my plays. So on his turn, he attacks direct for 18, he sets Peacekeeper, he sets a back row and he passes, and on my turn now, I'm not afraid to summon Sirocco. So I summon Sirocco and surprise, surprise, the summon is good. I attack and surprise, surprise, the attack is good. So I begin to wonder what his back rows are that 1, they don't stop a summon, and 2, they don't stop an attack. So he sets a back row and he passes. I special Bora in case he has a card such as Torrential, and he does. So with Torrential, it's quite good for him because he's able to search out a Gear Frame, and I normal summon Shura. I attack for Shura, and the attack goes through. So everything right now is so confusing. So he finally summons his Gear Frame, he adds Machina Force, but he chooses to not attack and just pass. So he must have had a read that I had Quilute. Now at this point in our duel, time was approaching. So I needed to do as much life point damage as possible, or else there's a chance I could have lost to time. So I summon Armwing with the help of Vayu's effect, and I begin to go into beatdown mode. The attack doesn't go through because I get compulsed, so I attack here, ask him if damage is good, but it's not. Before I can even ask, actually, he activates Regeki Break, he discards his Machina Fortress, which essentially is like discarding a free card because they play Machina Force, and he clears the board of my Shura. But his days of seeing Shura were not over. I normal summoned another Shura, I set a back row, and I pass. He goes End Phase Dust, which is a bit unfortunate because Mirror Force is really good against the Machina deck, and he sets a back row and he passes. Interestingly enough, we can see that he's not attacking. He just refuses to attack. So it's up to me to become offensive and attack. So I attack, he gives me the thumbs up, I Quilute, he takes 14, I bring out Gale, he takes 13, and we are in time. So his turn, he draws Compulse, and he decides to special summon his Machina Fortress, and I activate the save Bottomless that I had from the beginning. He changed Dust Tornado. Now mind you, if my opponent was going to activate Dust Tornado, it would have been best to do it blindly before summoning his Machina Fortress, because that card is so critical to the deck. However, he did it after the fact, thereby hitting a Torrential, which is okay, it's definitely a good hit, but I'm not going to activate Torrential anytime soon because my board presence is quite strong. So my opponent activates Call of the Haunted to bring back Gear Frame, and at this point, he draws, sets a back row, and it ends. I'm not sure why He's so afraid to attack. Now I draw on the Heavy Storm. So I have some options here. I can actually hold on to Heavy, or I can activate Heavy, or I can activate Brain Control. Because if I activate Brain Control and both the attacks go through, well, then that is 36 and that's GG. However, I decide it's best to not activate Brain Control and instead activate Heavy Storm. That would clear his board, including his monster, attack direct, and his life points will be so low that if I Brain Control any of his monsters, I win. So I go for the Heavy Storm play, and he chains Compulse, an excellent card in this situation. But I believe he compulsed the wrong guy. He compulsed his Gear Frame instead of my Stratos. I mean, not Stratos. Oh, I miss Diva Hero so much. Instead of my Shura. So with that, I understand because now he's able to reuse and abuse Gear Frame's effect. So I understand the play. However, by not returning Shura, if I have pretty much any other card, right, then it puts him in a spot where he loses, right, such as Bora. So anyway, I attack direct for 18, and that drops him down to 15. He draws into a monster, and he goes for the Gear Frame play. And with the Gear Frame play, he's able to summon both a Fortress and a Machina Gear Frame. So now my opponent is at 15, and I have Brain Control, so I already have the card that I need for game. However, I'm 800 points short as of now. But for turn, guess what? You guessed it, I drew the MVP Vayu. And with that, that's game. So I Brain Control his Fortress, I normal summon Vayu, I attack over both, and that is exact game. So definitely GG's to Avid, and I apologize if I'm butchering your name. I enjoyed our set, and I'm looking forward to the next one. With that out the way, on to the next, round 5.
Okay, so round 5. I'm up against TimesTwo. And for those of you who've seen my previous tournament run at Deck Devastators 4, you know TimesTwo gave me my second loss, ultimately placing me in 13th place, but the cutoff was into top 12. Now, TimesTwo is a very good duelist. However, if you've seen that set, you would know that the events that transpired were very, very sacky. Even TimesTwo admitted it himself. Now, for this event, we can see that he didn't open up that strong. While yes, he was able to start off with Solar Recharge, his opening play was just set a monster and pass. Looking at my opening hand, I opened up very well. With this hand, I can put on a lot of damage very quickly. And the name of the game against Lightsworn is to bring your opponent's life points down to 1,000 or less as soon as possible. Because the boss monster, JD, needs 1,000 life points to activate and resolve the effect. Now, I decide to go for Whirlwind Sirocco, because this, once again, puts on the most damage as possible. I mind control with the read that it's a Raikou, and my read was correct. Lightsworns only set 2 monsters, games 1 at least, Raikou and Necro. And generally, if it's a turn 1 play, the monster that they will set will be Raikou. So after mind controlling and confirming that his monster was indeed Raikou, I decide to special summon all of my Blackwings, make Catastor, and Colute for additional damage. The reason why I do this is because it brings his life point total down to 700, which means 1, Brain Control is dead, 2, JD is dead. Now I could have set Book of Moon, but the reason why I chose not to do it is because it only feeds into Heavy Storm. And at this point, my board presence is so strong that if he can't deal with it, he's going to lose. So my opponent draws his next card and concedes. So with that, we go to game 2. Now game 2, I also opened up Whirlwind Sirocco again. And my opponent had a similar turn, wherein that he just goes set a monster and pass. But this time, instead of activating 1 recharge, he activates 2 solar recharges. So I don't have as much damage to put on the board as game 1. However, I do have the option to go into Stardust. So I go into Stardust,
and I attack his face down, reading that it's a Raikou, but it was Hamster. But this isn't the end of the world, because as long as my opponent doesn't have a card to do 2 destructions on 1 turn, Stardust behind Mirror Force will be very efficient. And the reason why I say 2 destructions is because, let's say my opponent has a card like MST Heavy Storm back behind a Celestia, then that puts me in a really bad spot. But worst comes to worst. Let's say TimesTwo did have the perfect counter cards to what I have. I have Gorz, and this is why Gorz plays so nicely in Blackwings. When your opponents get rid of all of your problematic cards, such as Whirlwind, Oppression, or any back rows you might have, they have one more problem to deal with, and that is Gorz. So anyway, I run over the Hamster, he searches out Raikou, I set Mirror Force, and I pass. On his turn, he attempts to attack with Lila, which sends a clear signal that he has Honest. So I can't afford for my Stardust to die, so I Mirror Force to clear his Lila. I draw for turn, Heavy Storm. Now, most players tend to side out their Spell and Trap Destruction against Lightsworns, but the reason why I kept in Heavy Storm is because 1. TimesTwo is known for playing Glorious Illusion, so Heavy Storm gets rid of that. And 2. Blackwings are a trap-heavy deck, which means a deck that doesn't play that many traps will more than likely side into cards like Royal Decree. So I elected to keep Heavy Storm in. Now I go summon Blizzard, I search out Vayu from the deck, and I bring back Gale. And I attack direct with Blizzard and attack direct with Stardust. The reason why I chose to attack direct with Stardust is because I need to put TimesTwo on a clock. Whenever you're going against Lightsworn, you need to put them on a clock as fast as possible. The more turns they have, the greater chance that they'll have of summoning JD, and that only puts you in a worse position. Plus, let's say my opponent does indeed have Gorz. Well, Gale is actually a soft out to Gorz because he can have the attack and defense of Gorz or the Gorz token, whichever is more of a threat. So he chooses to just mill. He does mill a Plague, which is a bit unfortunate for me. On my opponent's turn, he goes stack for Plague, he summons Lila, and I try to go for a quick bait because I ask him if he activates Prio with Lila effect. If he says yes, then I contribute Stardust to negate and clear his field of his Lila. But he says no, and he makes Goyu Guardian. Now, he had 2 choices here. Either make Goyu or make Brio. Goyu was the best choice because with Brio, he needs to pitch at least 2 cards out of his hand. Because every last single card that I have on the field is a threat to Brionic. Gale can have, Blizzard's a tuner, and Stardust can beat over. And as Brio can only attack 1 card, he needs to pitch at least 2 cards out of his hand. Now, when we look at his graveyard, we can see he only has 3 different names. So when he summoned Goyu, that also told me that he doesn't have a 4th name in his hand. Because you should just assume that Lightsworns always have the JD in their hand. So he makes Goyu, he attacks my Gale, he takes it, and he has my Stardust. He sets Glorious and he passes. Now I have 2 choices on my turn. I can go Heavy Storm to ensure that my play goes through, or I can just summon Kalut under Whirlwind. And I choose to not activate Heavy Storm. Reason being is because I just can't respect the back rows in Lightsworn. It's either going to be a Glorious Illusion, a Beckoning Light, or Royal Decree. Nothing real. So I just can't respect it. I only want a Heavy Storm when 1, I'm going for game, or 2, my opponent has a card that stops my game plan up like Royal Decree. So I summon Kalut, and with Kalut, I'm able to search out another Blizzard, and I make Catastor. Catastor kills his Goyu. My Stardust is weakened, but it's still strong enough to kill Gale. I set a back row and pass, and he brings back Lila with the help of Glorious Illusion. So he attacks Stardust here, but at this point, there's nothing I can do because my back row is bottomless. Not to mention, my Stardust is halved anyway, so he's not doing much. So Stardust dies here, he activates Lila's effect, and takes out Whirlwind, which was quite interesting. Because although Whirlwind is a very, very broken card, I've already generated too much advantage from it. At this point, Whirlwind's not really doing much. So I think it would have been better to go for the unknown card, which was Bottomless Trap Hole. So he sets a monster, and on his end phase, he mills 5, 3 from Lila, 2 from Glorious Illusion, And among the 5, he does mill a Necro, which is really good for him. So I continue to be offensive. I normal summon Vayu. Vayu cracks over his face down Lila, and Catastrophe attacks into his face down, which was Snowman Eater, which I'm okay with. I didn't have a particular way to get over Snowman Eater in a clean manner, so trading the Catastrophe for a Snowman Eater at this point in the game, I was completely fine with. So on my opponent's turn, he summons Arcus and he attacks. I ask him if we can go to damage, and he says he passed priority. So I drop Kalut. And here, TimesTwo makes a minor misplay. And the reason why this is a misplay is because although he did pass priority in damage step, he can activate Honest in damage calc. And in damage calc, there can only be one chain link. And as he is the turn player, he can actually activate Honest. So if he goes damage calc, prio, Honest, even if I Kalut, I'll still lose the exchange, and I'll lose 2 cards. I'll lose my Kalut, and I'll lose my Vayu. But here, he just chose to let his Arcus die. So that was a bit of a misplay, especially considering the fact that he had Honest. So on my turn, I summon Blizzard, and with Blizzard, I bring back Kalut, and I synchron to Android. So I attack direct with both, and at this point, a second misplay transpires. TimesTwo, he has Necro in his grave, so he should have blocked that attack, because 1, it brings his life points down very low. And we can see that he has JD in his hand, and now he has 4 different names. By taking Android, he essentially loses 2 opportunities to pay with Judgment Dragon. So he should have Necroed Android's attack. But he didn't. I can set Icarus at this point, but I choose not to. Because like I said, you should always assume your opponent has the JD when you're up against Light Swarms. And if he summons JD, pays 1,000, gets rid of my Icarus, well, at that point, I'm in a bad spot. Plus, I have a Sirocco in the grave. So if he does summon JD and pay 1,000, I'll have an out to the JD anytime with Icarus on an arm wing through Vayu's effect. So I pass the turn, and on his turn, he goes summon Lumina. He pitches Wolf for Lila, that forces my bottomless. He summons JD, and of course he has the option to pay, and I'll take 3,000, but he doesn't do that because he needs to be wise with his payments since he's at 13 and he can only pay once. Once again, this comes back from the Android. Had he negated Android's effect with Gardner, then this would have been a clear opportunity to pay with JD and attack. So he runs over both of my monsters, which I'm completely okay with, and on my turn, I draw into my 4th card, Book of Moon. So I go for the play that I mentioned before, which is summoning Armwing, and I set Icarus and I end. Now, during the draw phase here, I could have actually activated Icarus attack immediately. But the reason why I chose not to do so was because I don't have a follow-up. Yes, I do clear 2 of his problematic cards, but then what offensive card do I have? Gorz doesn't do anything. I need him to attack me before my Gorz can do anything. So I allow him to go into main phase. He activates Luma's effect, pitches Celestia, and brings out Wolf, and that plays perfectly into the palm of my hands. So now I can Icarus, get rid of his 2 problematic cards. He does attack direct for 21, and I drop Gorz. Now, from the beginning, I had a read that my opponent had Honest. So I check the graveyard to see if there is a second Honest in the grave. And when I see he has only 1 Honest and 1 Gardner, I know that I need to be offensive at this point to win the game. So I summon Bora, activate Book of Moon, and with that, my opponent concedes. So well played by TimesTwo. I'm definitely happy I was able to get the run back and take the victory. And with that, on to the next, round 6. Okay, so round 6. I'm up against Yodaime95. And finally, the curse is broken and I'm able to go first. It took 6 rounds for me to finally win an RPS. So anyway, Yodaime is known for playing Blackwings. My opening hand isn't too strong, but I decided to go set Vayu. And I wanted to set Book of Moon, but as you just saw, I misclicked on Dueling Book. So I didn't want to give Yodaime the information that I would set Book of Moon after the misclick, so I chose to set MST instead. So I set value, set MST, and I pass. Now, on Yodame's turn, he summoned Sirocco, and immediately when he summoned Sirocco, I was beating myself up. Because Blackwings are a deck where if you stop the first summon, they can no longer proceed. Which means if I set Book of Moon like I intended to, as soon as he summons his Sirocco, I can activate Book, and now he can't special summon Bora. Because here I'm about to take a lot of damage. So anyway, he attacks direct for 17. It wasn't a direct attack, but Bora does piercing, and then he attacks direct for 2000. So essentially I took 37 anyway. He already knew that I was on Blackwings, so that's why he chose to attack in that order. Now, he ends his turn by setting 2 back rows and passes. I have a read that he has Icarus set, so I go end phase MST, I roll the die, evens odds, and I hit the Icarus, which is really good for me. Now, as I've mentioned before, Sirocco is so deadly in the mirror match. And as I already MST'd Icarus, at this point, I'm not thinking about playing around a second Icarus. So I go for it. I go summon Sirocco, I special summon Gale, I pump up, and then after pumping up, I half his Sirocco and run over. The attack fortunately goes through, and Yodame takes 6,000. This is why Sirocco is so deadly in the mirror match. Main phase 2, I synchro into Stardust because I don't want to leave a lot of Blackwings on my field. And I set Dust Shoot. Sorry, not Dust Shoot. I finally set the Book of Moon. On my opponent's turn, he draws. He thinks about what to do. He sets 2 back rows and a monster and passes. Now, most Blackwing decks are known for playing Dimensional Prison, Deep Prison, which means I'm not going to attack with this Stardust if I don't have to. I draw into Whirlwind, which is not bad. I go Whirlwind Blizzard, and he MSTs, which is completely fine. I could Tribute to negate, but I don't want to in case my opponent has a blowout card, such as another Icarus, Mirror Force, Torrential, etc., right? So in order to prevent anything from going wrong, I do not Tribute to negate with Stardust. Blizzard effect goes through, I bring out Gale, I have his Bora, and with Vayu's effect, I'm able to bring out Armwing. Now here he goes bottomless. At this point, I Tribute to negate because the likelihood of him having another real back row is quite low. So I run over his Bora, the attack goes through, and as I've mentioned before, Blackwing decks are very aggressive, so if they set a monster, it's usually a Vayu. So Blizzard is able to run over his Vayu. Now here, I have a lot of different options. I can actually synchro into another level 8, or I can leave the board as is. I elect to leave the board as is because I have Book of Moon, so I don't have to worry about him drawing a Sirocco off the top. But anyway, Yodame draws for turn, and when he sees his card, he concedes. So, game 2, now it's Yodame's chance to go first, and I open up Whirlwind Sirocco. It seemed to be a theme for this tournament. Anyway, my opponent goes Allure and banishes Bora, summons Shura, sets a back row, and passes. Now this hand is very good, but I don't want to go Whirlwind Sirocco. Reason being, there's a high likelihood my opponent has a Bottomless or an Icarus. So I want to save Whirlwind for when there's a stronger chance that my summon will go through. So I summon Sirocco, and immediately it gets Bottomless. So I made the right read by not activating Black Whirlwind. So I set Bottomless and I pass. My opponent attacks direct for 18, sets a back row, ×2, and ends, and I draw into Icarus. And Icarus is perfect with Vayu. Guys, you can see throughout this tournament, there have been so many times where I've Icarus Vayu. And just to reinforce, this is why I won triple Icarus and triple Vayu. So I set Vayu, I set Icarus, and I just hope that he doesn't have an Icarus of his own. However, unfortunately, he does. So he's able to take out both of my back rows, which isn't the end of the world because I'm not going to die. So my opponent summons Sirocco, special summons Bora, special summons Gale. And now things are looking bad because this right here is already 5,000. And I clearly have a Vayu set. He makes Stardust just in case I have Snowman Eater, and I take 5,000 off the rip. So I draw for turn a second Whirlwind. Now, I've done the best I can this duel to bait as many summon stoppers as I can. So now at this point, I don't have another choice. If this Sirocco summon gets stopped, then I lose. But if the Sirocco summon goes through, then more than likely I win. So I play double Whirlwind, I summon Sirocco, my opponent flips Book of Moon, and that's the game. No reason to continue. Now game 3, I get to go first this time, and I go summon Shura, set bottomless, pass. My opponent summons Cyber Dragon, and this was a bait. But I'm not worried about Cyber Dragon because I have Clue. So I let the Cyber Dragon go through. And it's a good thing that I waited because my opponent's next play is Whirlwind, Shura. So here I have to bottomless because he'll get too many pluses. So I bottomless his Shura. He attempts to attack over my Shura. We go into damage and I collude. With Shura's effect, I search out a Vayu because I have Icarus. He sets a back row and he passes. And I draw into Bora. I space his back row. It was a Yada. And Yada is a card that has recently seen popularity in Blackwing decks. However, my stance on it, it's just not a good card. Yes, he did get a +1 because I wasted my MST and he was able to bait it out and draw into a better card. However, the purpose of my MST wasn't to generate a plus or a minus. The purpose of my MST was to clear the board in order to make a push. Same thing with Heavy Storm. If I Heavy Storm and you go Chain Yada, like, cool, you didn't lose anything. But if I'm Heavy Storming, I'm doing it because I'm going for a play that is absolutely necessary. Either a very damaging play or a play that's going to lead me for game. And a lot of times, players that I see run Yada, they wind up just activating it. That way they can draw a better card. Now, Yada has done well for some people. So if Yada is your thing, continue to run it. But I think it's better just to play real cards rather than placement fillers. So anyway, now that his board is finally clear, I just decide to go super hyper offensive. And I special summon Bora, normal summon Shura, attack with everything and set Icarus. And the reason why I go for this play is because in order for Yodame to win this game, he would need a combination of Heavy Storm and Sirocco, or MST and Sirocco. If he doesn't have both Heavy or MST, then he'll lose. Because at any point, if he summons a monster, I'll immediately go Icarus, target his monster and his back row. So he takes all of this damage, which is quite a lot. I set Icarus just as I planned, and I pass the turn. And it also drops his life points below brain control range. Now, Yodame actually at this point doesn't have any plays. You can see from the replay. And during this part of our set, I was actually quite patient. But there was 3 minutes that went by before Yodame actually decided to make a play. So after 3 minutes goes by, I finally ask him politely to make a play. He apologizes, so no harm, no foul. He goes for a play, he summons Blizzard, and I Icarus immediately, and Yodame concedes. So that's it for round 6, and on to the next, round 7. Okay, so round 7, I'm up against Kapachi. Now this here is my 3rd Blackwing mirror of this event. I'm a Diva Hero player, yet I'm just going toe to toe with all of these Blackwing duelists. Anyway, I do win another RPS, so hooray! I allure, banish Vayu, summon Shura, set Book of Moon, and pass. My opponent goes Brain Control. Now generally, when the opponent brain controls your monster, you should chain Book of Moon. But in this circumstance, I did not. Reason being because 1, actually I didn't know what Kapachi was playing. And I figured that if he summons a tuner, I can book the tuner. And if he has a Caius, then I'll just book the Caius. So I let the brain control go through. He takes my Shura, and he swings. I take 18. Then he normal summons Blizzard. And I Book of Moon the Blizzard immediately. And this puts Kapachi in a very bad situation. Now I understand why he did this play. He was playing around Icarus attack. However, I would not have used my brain control
off of a chance that the back row is not Icarus Attack. Because look how it played out for him. He lost one of his strongest cards, especially in the mirror match, and now he's in the position where his Blizzard becomes Shura food. So he sets a back row and passes, and in order so that I don't play into Icarus Attack, I run over his face down Blizzard, Shura's effect goes off, I get Vayu, and once again I have the combination of Vayu, Icarus Attack. As you guys can see, this has been a theme throughout the whole tournament, so if I haven't stressed it enough, triple value is so good. And even if you don't want to play 3, at least in the Blackwing deck, you should be playing double Vayu. Anyway, I set Icarus, but my opponent goes end phase Dust Tornado. Now, on my opponent's turn, he summons Shura and I Colute. He also has a Colute of his own, but I'm not worried about this because I'm already so up in card advantage that I'm not worried about his Shura getting an effect. Plus, I have Mind Control and Sirocco and Black Rowan, 3 deadly cards in the mirror match. So by colluding here, if he doesn't have Colute, he's in a bad situation. And if he does have Colute, it burns one of his cards. So it's a win-win. So I Colute, he returns my Colute with a Colute of his own. He thinks about what to get, but the answer is obvious. He needs to get a tuner. And unless he's running Mistral, the only tuner he could get in this situation is Gale. So he gets Gale and he special summons Bora and makes Armor Master. Now, at this point in time, he is in a bad spot because off the top, I draw a second Whirlwind. So I don't even calculate the math at this point. I just go activate double Whirlwind, sack for Sirocco, search out double Bora, special summon double Bora, pump up Sirocco, run over Hishura, and that's game. Now here, Kapachi says rip, right? And I admit that was definitely a really sacky game. However, at the beginning, I wished Kapachi good luck, have fun, just showing proper sportsmanlike conduct to him. And he didn't say anything at all. He just proceeded to play. And although this might not seem like a big deal, I do think it's just good manners to show respect to your opponent. You can at least say you too, or have fun, or even just an okay or a thumbs up. The point is, you should acknowledge your opponent, because if we were playing in person and your opponent said good luck to you, would you just ignore them? No. So anyway, I just jokingly said these kind of things happen when you don't say good luck back. Anyway, now for game 2, Kapachi goes first, and he opens up quite strong. Whirlwind Shura, every Blackwing player's dream. He doesn't set his D prison, and this was a mistake. Granted, I understand that he's trying to play around Icarus Attack or Heavy Storm, but you've already got your plus, so don't be afraid to set a back row at this point. I summon Sirocco, I pump up, and I attack, so he takes 2,000, and I set both Deck Devi and Icarus Attack, despite the fact that I have Gores in my hand. The reason why I set both is because if my opponent summons a large monster, I can activate Icarus Attack. If my opponent summons a small monster, I can activate Deck Devi. And eventually, both of these back rows will be activated because if I'm forced to activate Icarus now, then in 2 turns time, I can activate my Deck Devi because I'll be able to summon Sirocco freely. And if I'm forced to activate Deck Devi first, I can activate Icarus at any time because I just need to control a Blackwing. So the point that I'm making here is Gores is not clogged in my hand despite the fact that I have 2 back rows. So anyway, on my opponent's turn, he thinks about what to do, and I know that he has a Bora in his hand, but he actually chooses to summon Colute, which is really interesting. So when he summons Colute, I flip up Deck Devi, and he gets absolutely destroyed here. And his response is Wild Card in the Mirror. Now, granted, Deck Devi is very situation. It's a swingy card in the mirror match. I will admit that. But it's better than most people give it credit for. Think about it. The scariest cards in the Blackwing deck, if you're not playing the Blackwing Mirror, then they are Vayu, because Vayu's effect can activate, Gale,
and Blizzard and Collude. Now, sending a Vayu to the grave, of course, is not good. But sending cards like Gale, Collude, Blizzard, these are all cards that can swing the game in Blackwing's favor. Not to mention, every Blackwing deck is going to be playing 3 Colludes. Every Blackwing deck is going to be playing 3 Blizzards. So Deck Devi hits a lot of targets in the deck. So is it the best choice against Blackwings? No, it's not. However, I kept it in because for the mirror match, there are only 2 cards that I side out, which is Dust Shoot if I'm not going first, and Royal Oppression because it's not that good in the mirror. So if I have to choose between having Dust Shoot or Royal Oppression versus Deck Devi, I'm going to choose Deck Devi. Anyway, this Deck Devi does the absolute most. Not only does it hit 3 cards, but it also gives me hand knowledge. And I'm the type of player where if I know what's in your hand, I'm not going to lose that game because I'm going to play around every single one of your cards. This is why I main Deck Devi in every deck that I play. I main it in Diva Hero, I main it in Blackwings. Like, I'm going to be playing this card for as long as we have Edison format. Anyway, on my opponent's turn, he sets a back row and he passes. I know what the back row is because I just Deck Devied him, so I don't want to summon Collude into a D-Prison because if I attack, he prisons, and yes, I can Icarus, but I'd rather use my Icarus to take out more threatening cards. So here he summons Bora, and now I Icarus. Now, even though I Icarus the exact same 2 cards that I would have before, the reason why I did it in this manner is because 1, it forces him to put a monster on the field, making my Sirocco alive. And 2, it also gives him the opportunity to play into my Goras. So I Icarus, I take both out. Both of his back rows out, and I'm able to drop a Goras, which I'm sure he was unsuspecting, because generally, Blackwing decks don't play Goras. Now, even though I'm in a great position, I still don't want to blow it, because I know everything that he has. So I know he has Mirror Force, so I only switch Goras to attack. I attack, it forces him to Mirror Force. I set Book of Moon, and this is the last turn of Deck Devi. Now, he contemplates whether or not to activate Allure, but ultimately decides not to and passes. So because I know he doesn't have anything, now it's Shora's turn to shine. So I go Shora, run over his Bora, search out Vayu, and attack direct with the token. And the Goras and Gora's token are both level 7, which means at this point I can make a level 8 Synchro. So after attacking direct with everything, I Synchro into Stardust. So now I have Shora, Stardust back behind a Book of Moon. I'm in a very strong position to win this game. My opponent thinks, he allures, gets rid of his Bora, goes Blizzard, brings back his Bora in the grave, and I book immediately. And with that, that's the end of the game. So there's so many different ways that I can go for game, but I just go summon Armwing from Vayu's effect, normal summon a second Shora, run over everything, and that's the game. So well played by Kapachi, and with that, on to the next, round 8. Okay, so round 8, I'm up against midpef, and at this point in the tournament, I am 7-0, which means I'm guaranteed to top 8, win or lose. Now, my opening hand, I have Vayu Icarus, but I don't set Icarus. Instead, I choose to set Mirror Force. Reason being, generally, when you set Vayu and Icarus, what will your opponent do? They're going to summon a monster and beat over your Vayu. And now your Vayu Icarus play didn't get any value. But if you set Vayu behind a Mirror Force, when your opponent attacks, they'll lose their monster, and generally, they will set back rows to protect themselves. If the opponent sets 2 back rows, you can go end phase Icarus, but if they only set 1, then at that point, their entire field becomes Icarus food. Whenever they commit another card to the field, you just activate Icarus and you don't have any problems to worry about. So I set Vayu, I set Icarus, and my opponent opens up really well. Future Fusion, Diva, Mirror Force, Brain Control. If he went first, I wouldn't have even stood a chance. But thankfully, I won the RPS. Now my opponent plays intelligently here because he doesn't go for the Future Fusion Diva play. He's playing around MST or more than likely Royal Oppression. Now he sets a back row and passes, and I summon Vayu and flip up my face down Vayu. I don't mind being aggressive here because I'm not scared of cards like Mirror Force or Torrential, because generally players don't respect Vayu. But midpef made a smart move and actually flipped up Torrential, much to my surprise. Now, on his turn, he draws into another real back row, and he goes for the Future Fusion play. So a Future Fusion, he didn't have to send me 0. I'm a true hero. He could have just went for it. Anyway, he Future Fusion, sends his hero, sends his water, banishes Mali from Mali, summons Diva, gets Spine Gilman, makes Stardust, and attacks direct with both. Now, to be honest, attacking direct with Stardust here was a bit of a throw, because most Blackwing decks play Dimensional Prison, and you don't want to lose your Stardust because let's say I go D Prison here. Well, now you're in a position where you can't even set your back rows because you become a target for cards like Heavy Storm or Icarus Attack. But midpef decided to attack, and his bold play paid off for him. So at this point, my life points are really low, and I draw into Whirlwind, the perfect card to draw in this scenario. However, I made a misplay here because I should have been focusing on playing around Bottomless, because if I get Bottomless, I lose. So what I did was Whirlwind Sirocco, my opponent flipped up Bottomless, and I proceeded to lose this game. However, if I went Whirlwind Quilute, that would have been a better play, because one, Quilute can't get Bottomless. So if I go Whirlwind Quilute, special summon Gale, then I can synchro into Brionic. And with priority, I can pitch Sirocco and return Stardust. At that point, of course, my opponent will Bottomless to Brionic because that card is too problematic. Then I have double Vayu with a Sirocco engrave. So I can go Banish, Banish. And of course, I didn't know that he had Mirror Force, but in the replay, we can see. So I go Banish, Banish, make Armwing, attack, and he's going to go Mirror Force because he's not going to want me to keep a Blackwing on the field. At that point, I can go Banish, Banish again and make Armor Master. So his field would have been Spine Gilman with Future Fusion because his Bottomless would have been used on Brio, his Mirror Force would have been used on Armwing, and Brio would have returned to Stardust. So now he only has just Spine Gilman and Future Fusion. Then I would have Armor Master with Mirror Force because I haven't used this yet, and double Icarus Attack. So on his turn, I can just wait because there's actually no reason to activate Icarus Attack. And if he plays his Brain Control, I can chain Icarus. If he doesn't play his Brain Control, then before his next standby phase, not the one coming up, but the following one, the one where Absolute Zero would come out, I can just activate Icarus and get rid of Future Fusion along with any other card that he has on the field. So that would have been the optimal play. But I go for the scrub play and I go Roman Sirocco, I get Bottomless, and I just proceed to lose. So he knows that I don't have anything. I'm forced to Mirror Force here or I lose. He sacks Rakias, takes out my Whirlwind. I set a bunch of back rows. And even here, I also misplayed again because what I should have done was wait until he entered battle phase. Then on his battle phase, Book of Moon his Stardust. And at that point, he has two choices. He can continue to attack or he can go into main phase 2. If he decides to continue to attack, then I can activate Icarus and get rid of his problematic cards. Or if he decides to go to main phase 2, before he enters his main phase 2, I can declare that I'm going to activate Icarus in his battle phase. So the point here is I could have played this so much better, but I was just playing poorly because at this point, I've been playing Yu-Gi-Oh! For 7 consecutive hours. And of course, so has everyone else. But for me, it started at 2 a.m. because I live in Korea. So it was 9 a.m., no sleep, 7 hours straight. So I'm just playing terribly, right? But not to take away from midpef because he played excellently during this set. But anyway, due to my series of misplays, midpef takes this game and we go on to game 2. Now here, I actually make a mistake. And the mistake that I made before even playing was my side deck choices. So pulling the rug, as a Diva Hero player myself, I know that pulling the rug is really good against Diva Hero. However, the problem with siding against Diva Hero is every card is situational. I sided in double pulling the rug, which I should not have. Honestly, I should have only sided in one. Now, pulling the rug is really good because actually take a look at his opening hand. All three of those cards get hit by pulling. The deck plays triple Diva, triple Caius, and Stratos. And some variants play Armageddon Knight. So pulling the rug is absolutely amazing against Diva Hero. The problem is, once they already have an established board, pulling the rug doesn't do anything. Anyway, on top of that, as you can see, my opening hand isn't that great. So I set Oppression and I set Dust Shoot because I know how strong Royal Oppression is against Diva Hero. And I pass. I flip up Dust Shoot and I send back his Stratos. And here was, again, another misplay. What I should have done is instead of setting Oppression in Dust Shoot, I should have set Rug in Dust Shoot. Because with my Dust Shoot, I could have sent back a card like, for example, Diva. And then when he summons Stratos, I can activate Pulling the Rug. That way, when I Dust Shoot him, I don't have to send back Stratos. So I Dust Shoot and I send back his Stratos, and it puts me in an awkward situation. He plays really well. He allures, banishes his Caius. He pulls in the Thunder King. I don't think that Thunder King is the greatest counter against Blackwings because Blackwings plays so many traps that are real. I mean, look, I already have 2 outs to him already. Mirror Force and Book of Moon. Not to mention I have Pollute, so if I pull any Blackwing, including a Vayu, I can just run over the Thunder King. Now, I understand the theory behind it, that Thunder King stops Synchros, he also stops Black Whirlwind, but also Blackwings can just go summon Sirocco. So, is it a terrible side deck card? No, of course not. But there are better options. Now, my opponent goes summon Thunder King, and he attacks direct for 19. I take it, he sets it back when he passes, and I draw into the second Pulling the Rug. So, quite unfortunate, but it's not the end of the world. I set Mirror Force along with the Pulling the Rug, and on my opponent's turn, he draws, he attacks. I don't want to play the game where I wait until I pull an out to Thunder King, so I just Mirror Force. Thunder King, his effect wasn't the problem, but Thunder King being 19 and me, unfortunately not having monsters, was the problem. So my opponent passes, I draw into another dead card, I MST, and I begin to go for the Kalute Beatdown, especially because I have a lot of real traps. Now, off the top, my opponent draws the perfect card, which is Plague Spreader. And the reason why this card is so good is because I knew he had Deep Sea Diva, right? I Dust Shooted him earlier. So, if he summons Diva and he activates the effect, I can activate Oppression. If he summons Diva and activates the effect, I can activate Pulling the Rug. If he summons Diva and doesn't activate the effect and just goes Mind Control and Synchro, I can activate Oppression. So the point is, I had so many outs to his play, and generally, if I was him, I wouldn't be trying to play around Pulling the Rug at this point because he doesn't have many options, right? But he pulls in a Plague, so he doesn't even have to worry about that. So that's really good, and I can't really stop this without losing my card. So I flip up Oppression, oppress his Catastor, I pull into Gores, which is dead, right? He draws Spine Gilman, which is the perfect card, because at this point, I'm going through a monster shortage, and I don't have anything to beat over this Spine Gilman, literally anything. So I take 17, I draw for turn, and I draw a Whirlwind, still no out to a Spine Gilman. I set some more back rows, I take 17 again, I draw into a Kalute, which is great. So now I go Whirlwind, Kalute, and it goes through. I search out Blizzard, and the reason why I search out Blizzard is because the way you can set up the chain links is so that Blizzard is chain link 1, Whirlwind is chain link 2, and therefore, when you bring back a card with Blizzard's effect, your opponent cannot activate Royal Oppression, because Royal Oppression has to directly negate the card in the chain order to stop the special summon. So, at this point, I decide to pass. My opponent attacks, I go Book, and he sets 3 back rows and passes. I draw into a second Blizzard, I go Summon, and I do the exact play that I mentioned about before, and I hope that he doesn't have Mirror Force, because I didn't draw into one of my Icaruses to chain. He does indeed have the Mirror Force. I lose a lot of cards, and I still can't beat over this Spine Gilman. It's comical, actually. So he flips up Gilman. He summons Diva. I go Rug. I understand why he activated the effect here. Very intelligent, because he wants to bait me to use Royal Oppression. That way, the lower my life points gets, he can activate a power card like Return. So I don't take the bait. I Rug him. He runs over my Kalut, and I draw. I set value. Now here, what I could have done was summon Sirocco. But the reason why I set value instead of summon Sirocco is because, one, I had to read my opponent at bottomless. Because look, he doesn't have a single bottomless in the grave. And two, I know Diva Hero quite well. There are only a few cards that he can pull that would do damage to me in this situation. For example, let's say he pulls a Caius. It doesn't do anything because I pull in the Rug. Let's say he pulls a Stratos, right? Well, it doesn't do anything because I pull in the Rug. Let's say he pulls a Tuner. Well, it doesn't do anything because I have Royal Oppression. The point is, there are very few cards that he can pull. And one of the few cards that he can pull is Rhoda or Dark Grepher. And my opponent draws Dark Grepher. And I was like, wow, that's crazy. Because I know he only plays one Dark Grepher. So he pulls Grepher, which puts me in a really bad spot because now I take my third direct attack from Spine Gilman. And this is why I tell everyone, never disrespect the Spine Gilman. But in addition to taking that 1700 from Spine Gilman, he drops me low enough to the point where I cannot pay for oppression. So he flips up Return and attacks direct with Caius, and that's the set. So midpef here, he said I bricked both games, but actually I didn't brick game one. Game one, I played poorly, but game two, I definitely was outplayed. midpef played very well and he deserved to win the set. And I was even honored to see that he's a fan, and he said that the reason why he played Diva Hero is because he saw a lot of my videos, so that made me really touched. But anyway, GG's to midpef, and I'm looking forward to us playing again in the future. But with that, that concluded the Swiss portion of RBET. So with that, on to the next, top 8.
Okay, so my first round of top 8. I'm up against Pinapinapina. If you like pina coladas and getting caught in the rain. Now, since this is a top 8 match, most of the other top 8 players know what the other players are using. The reason I say most is because I don't. So I asked my friend, what is Pina on? And he said, Vayu Turbo. So my turn 1 play is based off the fact that my opponent is on Vayu Turbo. So I summon Vayu of my own, and I attack his face down, reading that it's either a Vayu or a Raikou. And a dupe frog flips up. When I saw this dupe, I cannot tell you the amount of frustration that I had, because I felt like I just got snaked by my friend. And of course he didn't intentionally give me the wrong information, he just didn't know. But I have no one to blame but myself, because what I should have done was go back, check the VODs, or even ask around to figure out what Pina was on. So anyway, I take 1200 here, and now I'm in a bad spot because I see that he's on Monarchs. So if he goes sack Ryza, sack Caius, then I'm really far behind. So I have 2 back rows, and I decide to set them both. And the reason why is because I have a read that his back row is MST. And if he goes MST and hits my Dust Shoot, that's the game. Because even though I made a turn 1 misplay, I can play around it if I know what cards are in his hand. I'm the type of duelist who has like a 95% chance of winning if I know the cards in your hand. So I set 2, he goes end phase space, and luckily I catch a break and he hits the oppression. So I Dust Shoot him immediately, and I send back his Substitute, which effectively makes his hand dead. So he sets Treeborn and he passes. On my turn, I sack the Vayu for Sirocco, I special summon Bora, and I pump up Bora. This should have been my turn 1 play. Now, of course, I would have loved to attack the Treeborn and do 36, but many duelists forget Dupe Frog's effect. You have to select him as an attack target if he's face up on the field. So I run over his dupe, he takes 17 and searches out Swamp. Now, on his turn, he pulls into Brain Control, which is really good
because he's able to brain control my Sirocco, pump, activate his effect, and here I have a choice. I can either let the board die or I can collude. But I made a crucial mistake. I activated collude. And the reason why was because this gives me 3 darks: Bora, Collude, and Vayu. That way I can special summon Dark Arm. However, I know he has Scapegoat. And Sirocco and Dark Arm, even with Dark Arm's effect, I cannot effectively get rid of Scapegoat. While yes, I can attempt to attack, and it's like I got 5 attacks, right? 3 pops from Dark Arm, attack from Sirocco, and attack from Dark Arm, right? That's 5 different essential like destruction. But it's not worth it. Using up all those resources on just a Scapegoat and a Treeborn. Plus, if I leave my Dark Arm on the field, let's say my opponent draws into a card like Enemy Controller. I know he has Soul Exchange, so he can go Soul Exchange on my Dark Arm, activate Econ, tribute the Treeborn that he'll get, or even tribute my Dark Arm because he activated Soul Exchange to take control. And there's just so many different broken combinations that he can do if I leave the Dark Arm just on the field. And even basic play, just sack for a Monarch, right? So I don't want to drop Dark Arm unless it's going to be for game. So I make a crucial misplay here. It does give me 3 darks, and I get my Sirocco back, and I get punished. My deck laughs at me because I pull into Whirlwind. Had I not activated Collude, then I could have went play Whirlwind, normal summon Collude, search out Gale, make Armwing. And I know everything he has, right? Because he just played the new card that would have been unknown, Brain Control, last turn. So with Armwing, I'd be able to attack over his Treeborn. He's taking 27 every turn. If he activates Scapegoat, he's taking 28 every turn. So things just go really downhill for Pinapinapina. But that wasn't the option because I colluded. So, to be honest, guys, why did I do that play? When you're in the hot seat, sometimes you just make mistakes. And that's all that there is to it. So during the end phase, my opponent flips up Scapegoat and he gets 4 goats. On his turn, he draws an Econ, the exact card that I said would have countered me had I dropped Dark Arm. So he summons Swamp to thin out his deck. He sends a Swamp and he ends. I draw into Torrential, which is good. I run over one of his tokens, set Torrential and pass. And now Pinapinapina draws into 1-for-1, which means he can finally go for a little bit of an offensive play. During the standby phase, he brings out Treeborn, activate Econ, takes my Sirocco. Now he goes heavy to clear my back row and 1-for-1 and gets this Substitute, the one that I sent back with Dust Shoot. So here, I'm going to eat some damage, right? This is 3,000 direct, and there's nothing that I can do about it. And he's even able to tribute off my Sirocco with Substitute's effect. So now, things have gone south because I have 4 darks in the graveyard. So Dark Arm is essentially dead. And I'm at 35. And since he has a Substitute on the field, pretty much he can put some damage on. Now, of course, 2 of his Swamp Frogs are already gone. But you shouldn't underestimate the Froggies because their strength in numbers. And 35 is not that much. So he essentially can put me on a 2-turn clock with what he has now, to a 2 to 3 turn clock. So anyway, I draw for turn, I draw heavy, completely useless. But I cannot just leave an open board or else I can just lose to anything. So I summon Armwing, I can't even attack. Technically I can attack, but his Dupe Frog can't be destroyed by battle due to Substitute. I set heavy as a bluff and I pass. Now Pina pulls into Ryza. So he has game, pretty much. He has game. However, even if not game, right, he has the option to put me in a really tight position. However, he doesn't go for the offensive play. He plays very conservatively. And he switches the Unifrog to attack, attacks the wreck, takes out my back row. And now that he sees that I set Heavy Storm, he knows that I'm weak. He knows that I don't have Gores. He knows I don't have anything, right? So on his turn, he thins out the deck again by sending a Substitute, and I draw into Gores right on time. I still can't attack, so I'm just forced to pass. On his turn, he brings out Treeborn, summons Ryza. Now he's not worried about anything because of last turn. He attacks the wreck for 400, he attacks the wreck for 24, and I summon Gores right on time. And then on my draw phase, I pull into the perfect card, Sirocco. Sirocco has been MVP for me throughout this tournament. And the reason why Sirocco is so good here is because not only do I have Whirlwind, but by tributing over Gores, it'll actually put the third Dark in my grave. So I go Whirlwind, tribute Gores for Sirocco, special summon Bore off Whirlwind, summon Dark Arm. Dark Arm get rid of the 3 problematic cards that essentially would save him. And with this line, it is lethal. Run over Unifrog, attack direct for 17 because of piercing, and my opponent concedes. So, despite misinformation from game 1, I'm able to take it. Now my opponent just sets a monster and passes. So I go Whirlwind Bora and I make a first turn Armor Master. Now at this point, I have a read that my opponent has Snowman Eater set. So I don't attack. Instead, I just set Deck Devi and I pass. And immediately I Deck Devi him. But much to my surprise, he did not have Snowman Eater. It was a Treeborn Frog. Now here, as you can see, I Deck Devied him right away in the draw phase. But even if I Deck Devied him in the standby phase, he can still bring back Treeborn. So I'm not sure why Pinapinapina didn't bring back Treeborn and sack the Treeborn for Ryza and return to Whirlwind. Perhaps he was scared of Gores because I was able to win last game due to Gores. However, with the hand he has now, there's no reason to be scared of Gores, because an out to Gores is Gores, which he has. Not to mention, although this isn't the most efficient play, worst comes to worst, he can even go on his turn, bring back Treeborn, activate Soul Exchange on my Gores or Gores token, whichever is threatening him more, tribute his Treeborn, tribute my other guy for his Gores, right? So he has so many different options. He also has the Soul Exchange Econ combo. The point is, he definitely should have went for a Ryza play here, but he just sets a back row and he passes. Now, I summon Kalut. I know he has Gores because of Deck Devi, but I'm not worried about Gores because I have Icarus Attack. And I cannot just keep this Kalut here because I also know that he has Ryza. So if I don't do anything, he'll just go summon Treeborn, sack for Ryza, and my Kalut gets returned, and that's not good, right? Because my hand's not good. So I actually attack here in order to bait out this Gores to 1, get rid of the problem card, and 2, if he does bring back Treeborn and sack the Treeborn for Ryza, I can chain Icarus and get rid of the Ryza and the Gores. So I attack here, he drops Gores as planned, and I set Icarus and I pass. Now, on his turn, he draws on a Junk. Junk is destroyed due to Deck Devi. He brings back Treeborn. He doesn't summon Ryza. Very well played and being conservative. He attacks. I'm forced to Icarus here, so I take out the Gores and Gores token. He sets a back row and he passes. I summon Fossil Dyna. I know what he has set, but I continuously need to be offensive. Now here I attack. And after the attack, I have the option to set Book of Moon. But I choose not to because I know my opponent has Soul Exchange. So pretty much if I set Book of Moon here, my opponent goes Soul Exchange, and then yes, I can chain my Book of Moon on his Ryza, but look, I don't have any monsters. I have no way to beat over that Ryza. So I cannot afford for him to go for the Soul Exchange Ryza play. Now, if I just pass and he goes sack for Ryza, that's okay. Yes, I'll take some damage, but then I can summon Fossil Dyna and I can beat over his Ryza with Book of Moon. So I end, and he draws into Sirocco, and I'm just like, this is not good. It's getting out of hand. So he thinks for a second, he does summon Ryza, and he doesn't attack, right? Maybe once again, Gores scared him. So here, I set Book and I pass, and now that I have a back row, he's not scared to attack. He attacks direct with 24, and I do think about booking it, but ultimately I choose not to, because if I run over this Ryza with my Fossil Dyna, I have no real back row, and I'm worried about him summoning Sirocco afterwards. So yes, I can beat over the Ryza, yes, I can save 24, but I don't have anything to deal with the Sirocco, and I just decide to take the 24. So he activates Swamp Frog's effect and returns Swamp Frog to his hand. Now on my turn, I still don't pull an out to Sirocco, but I ultimately decide that now I cannot wait any longer. I waited one turn for an out to Sirocco and I didn't draw it. The reason why I can't keep waiting is because if he summons his Swamp Frog, instead of returning Swamp Frog, he could just return Ryza. And with this hand, if I keep getting Ryza, like, that's it. So it's quite unfortunate that I essentially took 24 for nothing. So I summon Fossil Dyna, I attack over, and now he can summon a Sirocco. the card that I knew I didn't have an out to. So he runs over my Falso Dyna. So now I'm kind of in a bad spot. I draw a Blizzard, which is kind of good here, right? It's actually more than kind of good. It's amazing because I'm able to make Goyu Guardian. So I make Goyu Guardian and I take a Sirocco and I set both Icarus and Deck Devi. So now I'm feeling really good, right? On his turn, he draws into Sirocco. He brings back Treeborn and I say it's fine. And he sacks and sets a monster. Now when he does that, I had no idea what he was sacrificing for. Because I'm like, you're not playing Malicious Edge or Destiny Hero Malicious. So what could that set monster be? So I decided to find out because, you know, curiosity killed the cat. So I deck debut him with his own monster and I check. And I see that he actually set Dark Dust Spirit. And this guy's a problem because his effect also activates when he's flipped face up. Which means if I go Goyu attack, that's going to get flipped up and my Goyu is going to get destroyed. And of course, I could set Solemn, right? But the problem with setting Solemn and flipping up his Dark Dust is on his turn, he'll just go bring back Treeborn, sack Treeborn for Sirocco, and look, I don't have an out to the Sirocco. So it's quite an interesting position that I'm in, right? I'm sorry. He wouldn't go bring back Treeborn, sack for Sirocco because then Goyu would beat over it. He would go Soul Exchange Sirocco. So this is the problem that I'm currently facing. So ultimately, I decide that there's nothing I can do to out that guy, so it's best to just kill him now and set Solemn and just pray. He brings back Treeborn, he sacks for Sirocco, and I have the choice. I know he has a Soul Exchange, so I can Solemn here, or I can pull an out. So I said, okay, if I pull Sirocco, I will be in such a great position, right? Because I didn't know that he had Torrential. But if I pull Sirocco here, I'll be in such a great position, especially because I have Solemn and Icarus of my own. So I don't even need to pull a Sirocco. Like worst comes to absolute worst, just pull any Blackwing, right? But a Sirocco would be best here. So I allow the summon to go through. He attacks direct, and I pull into Gores. So this was not a good look, right? I think this was the only moment in tournament where like I pulled into Gores where I had multiple back rows and he kind of just sat there dead. However, as you guys saw in my previous sets, Gores was the MVP, so I do not regret playing Gores and Blackwings. So anyway, he attacks again, drops me down to 800. I pull in a Falso Dino, which just doesn't do anything here. I set it, he pulls in the Regeki break, he attacks, and at this point I'm just getting beat down. He sets a back row, I draw in the book, I set it, he just keeps beating me down with Sirocco, like I'm forced to set it, and I draw my cards in the wrong order, right? Because book was great because it saved me, but it's like I needed this Sirocco sooner. I needed this Sirocco before things got out of hand. So I summon Sirocco, he Torrentials, and I think, okay, can I chain Icarus here? And I'm like, well, I can chain Icarus here and that will clear his board. But the problem is, if he has a Caius, then I lose because he'll just Caius target himself, right? So I'm just like, let's just Solemn. So I Solemn here, and after I Solemn here, I attack. He activates Regeki break, and I was like, well, that's just game. So I concede immediately. So on to game 3. Now game 3, I also open up first turn deck Devi. So I'm just like, okay, today is my lucky day. I'm going to win the tournament. Spoiler alert, I did not. So I allure and I banish the second Galoot, and I was actually kind of conflicted if it was better to make first turn Arm Wing or first turn Armor Master. And ultimately I decided with Arm Wing because I wanted to keep the Shura in my hand to beat over things potentially and search cards out of my deck. So I make first turn Arm Wing, I set deck Devi and I set Rug, and you know the drill. We deck Devi immediately because we don't want to give my opponent a chance for Treeborn access, right? If I waited here, then he can go summon Swamp, he sends Treeborn, and now his whole hand becomes live. But this deck Devi didn't really hit him that hard, right? He has Regeki break, heavy, Gores, Caius, so his hand is quite nice. So he passes, I draw, I pass, he draws, he passes, and I summon Bora. And of course I could have summoned Shura before, but this is what I mean, why I love my Values. I don't want to Icarus real cards, and Shura is so important. Now Bora, he's also important too, he plays a great role in the deck, but if I have to choose between Icarusing Shura and Icarusing Bora, I'm going to choose Bora every day of the week. So I hit him for 17. He does drop the Gores, and I set Icarus and I pass. His go. Now that's the third turn for Deck Devi. So like I said, that Deck Devi didn't really hurt him much. He attempts to attack, and I Icarus. I clear both of his cards. He sets a back row. I draw on the Dust Shoot, and I think about whether or not I want to summon the Shura, but ultimately I decide not to. So I Dust Shoot him, and here, actually, I made a mistake. So I sent back the Substitute. And the reason why I sent back the Substitute is because I believed that he was still under Deck Devi, but he wasn't, right? So during the draw phase, the Substitute would die from Deck Devi. So he just put his Substitute back without me even picking a card. So I said, hold up. I don't want to send back Substitute. I want to send back Ryza. And then he said, okay, I'm going to make a change to my play. And I went back and I checked the log and I saw that he was not under Deck Devi. But that's the thing, guys. I don't want to be the type of player, especially in tournament, to take his plays or decisions back. So even though I checked the log afterwards and realized that it would have been better to send back Substitute, I dealt with it because that's tournament. When you make a mistake, you shouldn't be asking your opponent, hey, I'm sorry I messed up, can I go back? Like, no, that's not how it works. Like, you have to deal with your mistakes. So anyway, this actually kind of worked out because it forces him to use heavy, and also I have Torrential. He only has one more Monarch left as well. So that last Monarch 100% is going to get Torrentialed when the time comes. So he summons Substitute. He's able to get Treeborn access finally. I summon my man Vayu and I set him behind the Torrential. I love this combo. Vayu Mirror Force, Vayu Torrential. It's just so chef's kiss. On his turn, he draws. He brings back Treeborn. I had hoped he would summon a Caius here, but he didn't. So he just summons Swamp Frog and he attacks over my Vayu. And at this point, I'm just like, okay, well, if you're just going to leave Shura Food out, it's finally time to summon the main man. So I summon Shura, I attack his Dupe Frog because I don't have a choice, and he Regeki breaks, which I'm okay with, right? Of course, it would have been better if the Shura attack went through, but still, like, I'm not going to lose to a Swamp Frog, I'm not going to lose to a Dupe Frog. I have Torrential set in case he decides to get a little aggressive and summon his Caius. So on his turn, he thinks for a bit, and he finally decides to summon a Monarch. But he chooses Ryza. Okay, fine. I Torrential. So on my turn, I draw into the perfect card, Falsodyna. And look what's in my grave. Vayu and Armwing. So here, I activate Vayu's effect, and I was supposed to bring out Armor Master, but I accidentally brung out a Armed Wing. And now, this was a mistake on my behalf, but of course, Pinapinapina should have said something, right? But he's in a top 8 match. He's not going to say like, hey, you brought out the wrong card. But anyway, so it works out in his favor because he takes 200 less, but that's just not the correct card that was supposed to come out. So I attack him direct for 25. I set Deck Devi, and at this point, I know the game is over because if anything happens, then I can just Deck Devi this Armwing, which is supposed to be an Armor Master. He draws into Regeki Break. He sets it. I go attack for 12, and I attack for lethal here. He goes Regeki Break, activate Deck Devi again. He draws into Dust Tornado, and that's the set. So definitely a very challenging set against Pinapinapina. He definitely deserved his spot in top 8. And with that, on to the next, top 4. Okay, so top 4. I'm up against Ghost Ride the Whip, Ghost Rider 15. And I actually know that he's on dragons, unlike the misinformation that I received from the last set. Knowing this, the 2 back rows he have set are clearly fake. So I go Allure and I pull into Rowan Shura. So I go for that play. And with Rowan, I search out Kalut. Now here I go Shura attack, destroy his Whitestone, and with Shura's effect, I search out Vayu. Now main phase 2, I had quite a few different options I could have done. One of them including special summoning Bora, synchro into Incantaster. That way I can actually activate Deck Devi at any point in time. However, my logic at the time was my opponent will attempt to try to beat over Vayu or Shura, and if he does, I can Kalut and Deck Devi afterwards. Now, the reason why this might not have been the best play is because that assumes my opponent doesn't draw into a card like Heavy Storm or Giant Trunade. But otherwise, the play is a really solid play. Now, I set both my back rows and my turn, and my opponent flips up double reckless. So here, he does what dragon players do best. Play solitaire. And eventually, after he's done playing solitaire, he goes Vortex Trooper and attempts to attack my Vayu. So I go Colute, and he draws a card due to Vortex being destroyed. He plays Upstart. I chain Deck Devi to Upstart. Now, Vortex in his hand was destroyed, so we need to continue resolving the chain correctly. He draws for Upstart, and then he draws an additional card for the Vortex that was destroyed through Deck Devi. And the Dragon player goes back to doing what he does best. Once again, playing solitaire. So this is part 2 rather of him playing solitaire. Game 1, part 2 of him playing solitaire. And we can see that his hand is absolutely broken. But because I deck devied him, I know everything. I know he has Future Fusion set, and I know he doesn't have anything in his hand to stop an attack. So I go for the OTK. Summon Shura, special summon double Bora, and that's game. So game 1, I'm able to take it because of the power of Deck Devastation Virus. Now game 2, as we can see, this is quite bad for me. He opened up first turn Future Fusion. Didn't even have to draw into it, just first turn Future Fusion. But he didn't have much of a strong follow-up play afterwards. I also had Whirlwind Sirocco, so I was able to make a play here. But when I set bottomless, he goes End Phase Decree, which is not good for me at all. And he goes for the Goyu Guardian play. So he makes Goyu Guardian, beats over my Stardust, and attacks direct with his Debris Dragon. So I draw into Gores, which isn't too helpful in this situation, but I summon Shura and I add Colute. Honestly, against dragons, it may be best to even side out Gores, because generally, if they're going to go for an offensive push, they're going to do it with the help of Kokimaru Draco. And Draco actually prevents light and dark monsters from being special summoned. So anyway, I go Shura, Whirlwind, I add Colute, and I'm able to beat over his Debris Dragon. I don't have to use my Colute. I get Vayu because I have Sirocco, and I beat over my own Stardust, and I Fissure. And I summon Android in defense mode, because now it's been 2 turns, and I don't have a way to deal with his 5-headed. So, my opponent draws and brings out his 5-head. He goes Super Rejuve, Card Destruction, and with its Card Destruction, he pulls into Pot of Avarice, the last card. So far, the 3 cards he pulled off of Avarice are completely dead. But with his Avarice, he pulls the exact 2 cards he needs to win the game. Instant Fusion, and not only Instant Fusion, Red Eyes Darkness Metal. He needed both of those cards in order to win on this turn right now. Because if he didn't pull both, guys, I would have been able to easily make a comeback, right? I can go MST to clear his Future Fusion, get rid of his 5-head. I'm not worried about the Decree at this point because I have Whirlwind Sirocco. I have Sirocco and Vayu in the grave. Like, it just would have been game on my turn. But he pulled the 2 perfect cards. That's just crazy, man. That's actually just crazy. Like, that's Yu-Gi-Oh! Like, at the end of the day, we all try our best to play our best, but sometimes it's just your day. So he pulls into the 2 perfect cards, and to add insult to injury, right? So you could say, oh, a true hero, you lost this game because you put Magical Android in defense mode, right? Well, let's say I put Android in attack. Well, he does the exact same play that he does, literally the exact same play. Well, I'm at 73, right? So his Red Eyes, not Red Eyes, it doesn't really matter. But let's just say his 5-head beats over my Android in attack. I take 26. He attacks direct. I take 28. And then he attacks direct with 19. So 26, 28, 19. If you add that up, I'm not a math teacher, but it's 73 exact. Which means it didn't matter if Android was in defense or in attack mode. The exact same play that he did was game. And it's just so crazy. He pulled the exact 2 cards that he needed. All right. I understand a 1 card top deck, like it happens a lot in Yu-Gi-Oh! But a 2 card consecutive top deck that he just needed perfectly, just moving on. Game 3. So game 3, I get to start, so it's quite good. And I open up Whirlwind, but not a good target. So I decide to summon Falsadina because this will stop a first turn Future Fusion play. And guys, look, it's just not a True Hero's day. He did in fact open up first turn Future Fusion. Game 2, Future Fusion first turn. Game 3, Future Fusion first turn. So this Falsadina is able to hold it down for 2 turns, right? So here I summon Vayu, and I'm looking actually quite good. Even though this field is really small, right? I have Vayu that can be backed up by a Kalut. I have Whirlwind, which means at any point if I pull like a stronger Blackwing, I could go Whirlwind Shore, Whirlwind Borer, even Whirlwind Taroko by tributing off my Vayu. So it's just like I can put on a lot of offensive pressure very soon, right? I have Fissure to back up any problematic card that he summons, so it's just like I am feeling very confident. Goris as well, so it's just I'm feeling good. I'm feeling good, right? Like that when you go into Google and the old Google thing, it says like I'm feeling lucky, right? Like that's how I'm feeling. I'm feeling lucky, right? Like Daft Punk. Anyway, so he searches out a Blue Eyes, and I attack direct for 12. On his turn, he draws in a Card Trooper, which doesn't help him at all. I mean, he can beat over the Falsadina with Card Trooper, right? But anyway, he goes trade in, and on his second card, look what he draws. Oh my goodness. Lightning Vortex. So Lightning Vortex obviously stops me, right? So here he goes Vortex, and now he's free to special summon. He's able to play the Future Fusion that he's had since turn 1. And I hope that he actually misplays and doesn't bring back Kokimaru Draco. But once again, you don't get to the finals because actually Ghost Rider is the one who wound up winning the event. You don't get to be the champion by making misplays. So he plays correctly, summons Card Trooper, Red Eyes, and Kokimaru Draco. I take a lot of damage, and I draw for turn into Shora, actually, if my memory serves me correct, right? Yeah, I draw into Shora. So I go Whirlwind Shora, but I can't even special summon Gale because he has Kokimaru Draco up on the field. But what I can do is beat over, and with the help of Kalut, I can special summon, bring out Vayu, run over his guy, and Fissure. So now I have successfully, right, main phase 2, right, have make Armor Master, make Colossal, Fissure. Now the reason why I make Colossal Fighter here is because dragons have a very difficult time beating over monsters with 28 or higher, right? And my opponent has already used Lightning Vortex. Now let's say that I make Stardust, right? Stardust and Colossal in this situation lose to the exact same cards because my life points are so low that if he's able to activate a card that forces me to tribute to negate, well, 39 dragons can sneeze at you and you'll die, right? So I make Colossal Fighter, but he already has game, right? He goes Pot of Avarice, and the reason why I say he already has game is because he could just go Vortex, Future Instant Fusion, bring out Red Eyes, right? Like, you know, he already has game. He just wants to play Solitaire. But anyway, so he goes Instant Fusion, he brings out the guy, brings out Red Eyes, brings out Kokimaru Drago, goes Vortex, and that's the end of the run. So definitely GG's by Ghost Rider. Like, it's just very savage game 2 and 3 that he opened up Future Fusion. Of course, once again, props to him because he deserved to win. But it's just always that curse by a true hero. He gets so close, but he doesn't quite clutch it out. But anyway, guys, if you made it this far, I appreciate and love and thank you for the support always. Until next time, a true hero out. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And let me give one call. Shout out to the Blackwings. Caw-caw! Peace.
Subscribe or you too will be sent to the Shadow Realm.